Chapter 4. The 5th of January had come just the same as any other day, of the winter that is. Macaulay and Dundee had quickly found themselves shuffled out of the front door, early in the morning, and ready to begin another day at school. Though they were just returning from Christmas break, it had seemed as though they hadn't missed any school at all. Well, Dundee encouraged. I guess that's what happens when you have both regular school and then homeschooling from Sterling. Yeah. Just for a short amount of time longer, Macaulay said as he turned his head just enough to peer at his sister by the corner of his eye. What are you talking about, Macaulay? We're only in the 8th grade. We have another. You. Macaulay interrupted. Have another 4 years of school to go. Remember, sis, that we're about to turn 13, after that I can't be out of the house. In the daylight. Dundee quickly counter-interrupted. I don't think that it's fair. I have to go out into the cold while you get to stay at home. Looking back towards her brother, as they continued on their way to the bus stop, she shook her head in disgust. I hope that Sterling makes it very hard. Not likely. Dundee. Suddenly speaking with a loud voice and with his arms, Macaulay suddenly turned to where he was walking backwards as he faced Dundee. Do you realize that about half of the time now when you see Sterling, James, Lloyd, and Scott, that I don't see or hear a thing? Hell, I watched you have a complete conversation this morning, while you were waiting for Dad to get out of the bathroom, with your own shadow. You mean that you can't see them anymore? Dundee's voice was suddenly higher pitched as the change of subject took place. No. Or at least not all of the time anyhow. Sometimes I see them. Or I think I see them. Sometimes hear them. Pausing, as Macaulay turned to face the right direction, as they neared a group of other kids waiting on their school bus. I didn't think that it would ever happen to me. As Dundee listened intently to her brother, she could have sworn that his voice was about to crack as he began to speak quietly. Then, as she turned to face him, she found him staring down towards the snow-covered ground. Well, if this helps at all, I'm probably next in line, Macaulay. Reaching out towards him, Dundee lightly grasped his arm, causing him to look back at her. Those guys have always been part of our lives, Dundee. They are our friends, our teachers, and our... Macaulay. They are still our friends, they can still teach us. And, through our seances, you'll see them. Yeah. You're right, Macaulay said as he lightly hugged his sister. Then, in just that moment, the large yellow bus turned the corner and revved up its motor as it headed straight for them. By the time that they had unboarded the bus, at the school, Macaulay was about to enter the building's front door when a familiar voice called out his name. Turning back, to look into the direction that he had came from, he saw a girl, that he had secretly grown a crush on, approaching him as she carried a load of books in her arms. Lovisa. Macaulay answered. Lovisa Jewel. Right? Macaulay asked just loud enough that the girl could hear him. The girl was much shorter than himself, same age, and well overweight. Any images involving her weight, however, dissolved as the smile on her face caused her to glow in a way that made his heart seem to beat faster with her presence. Of course, Macaulay, Lovisa said as she now stood beside him, and how have you been doing? She asked as she leaned towards him enough to nearly kiss him. Macaulay was headed into the building up until she called his name. Now, as they stood just outside the door, he had almost dared himself to ask her out. I'm doing good. What are you doing after school today? The nervous preteen asked. Simultaneously, as he asked his question, Lovisa reached out, towards him, and placed her hand just inside his partially unzipped coat. Seconds later Macaulay felt the warmth of her hand, through his t-shirt, on the side of his rib cage. I don't have any plans. But, I bet that we could probably spend a lot of time together though. As he spoke, he knew that the words coming out of his mouth must have sounded feeble-minded. Just her presence caused him to get lost within himself. I mean, you could come over to my house, or maybe we could just walk around. Or something. As she continued to hold his side with her right hand, she reached, with her left hand, and lightly touched the tip of one of his canines. You know, Macaulay, Lovisa said as she gently placed her other hand in his coat along with the other, I've always had a crush on you. As she spoke, she slowly turned Macaulay's body to where they were face to one another as she now placed both hands against his lower abdomen, rested on top of his leather belt, with his t-shirt still separating them, and I would like to go out with you, Macaulay. I would. Yeah. I wanna go out with you too. Macaulay's face must have flashed at least a half-dozen shades of red as he stuttered his response. Then, as the words finally found their way out of his mouth, a bunch of tiny spots filled his vision as everything else around him seemed to turn black. Hey Macaulay. Macaulay Declue. You hear me, buddy? An older woman's voice rang out. Then, just as he heard the voice, he was suddenly overwhelmed by an odor that instantly caused his eyes and nose to run as they had also burned. My name is Aggie Lai, Macaulay. I'm an EMT, and I'm here to help you. As he opened his eyes he was instantly blinded by the brightness of a flashlight in his face. Can you hear me, Macaulay? The older woman pried. Yes. I do hear you. Macaulay responded as he focused his eyes on the light. Pulling his right arm up, to push the light away from his face, he quickly found his arm restricted, up above his elbow, by a blood pressure cuff. He then also noticed, as he looked up, that he was inside the back of an ambulance. With this discovery he had also found that an oxygen tube was strung up under his nose. Macaulay. The EMT spoke up again, we're talking to your father on the phone right now. You have fainted. You're not hurt, but I think that you need to be seen by your doctor. Alright, dear. Okay. Macaulay answered as he pushed himself into the padded gurney. Where's my sister? I'm right here, Macaulay. Dondi spoke up from the front seat. Just relax. In his sister's words it sounded as though she had been crying. Here, Macaulay. The older woman said as she held a cell phone to his ear. It's your father. Hello. Hi, Macaulay. How are you feeling, buddy? Ron asked as he had walked out to the kitchen with the phone. He had just gone back to bed after sending his children out the door. The last thing that he had expected was to hear that the local ambulance had picked up his son. I'm alright. I guess, Dad. Macaulay responded. Well, listen, bud. The ambulance is gonna take you to the hospital and then I'll be down there as soon as I get dressed. Alright? Okay, Dad. Please hurry. I'm kinda scared, he said honestly, and then let the medic take the phone back to herself. Seconds later Dondi's face appeared within his field of vision. It's gonna be alright, Macaulay, Dondi said, and then bent over as she buried her face into the side of his neck. They're gonna help you, Macaulay, she said, and then began to cry quietly. Well, Macaulay. The older woman said. I think that you're pretty lucky to have a sister that loves you so much. Then, just as the medic stopped talking, the ambulance began to move. Hold on now. Dondi, how about you get back up in the seat? Alright, dear. As soon as we get to the hospital you can hold on to him all that you want. Alright. As Ronnie ran back into the room, he quickly threw on a pair of sweatpants as he simultaneously dialed the number to the City Hall. Hello. City Hall, this is David Declue speaking. How may I help you? Hey, Dad. Oh, hi, Ronnie. How are you doing this morning? His dad asked in a very cheerful voice. Very badly, Dad. Macaulay's been picked up at the school by the ambulance. My dear. What happened, Ron? Dave asked with instant excitement in his voice. With his question, he saw, out of the corner of his eye, his daughter-in-law walk out of her office as she heard his side of the telephone call. What's going on? Belinda asked as she walked up to David's desk. Muffling the receiver of the phone, he looked at her as he spoke quietly. I don't know, honey. Hold on just a minute. Dad. Macaulay fainted at school. And they fainted? Dave interrupted. Yeah, Dad, Ronnie said as he began to head out of the room. The ambulance is taking him to the hospital right now. Would you please have Belinda meet me over there? He's probably in the emergency room already. Actually, Ron. I'll take her there myself, Dave said as he stared back at Belinda. She still had a look of question in her face. Thank you, Dad. I'll be over there very soon. All right, buddy, Dave said and then hung up the phone. Hey Belinda. Go get your coat and purse. You and I are going over to the hospital. What's wrong? She asked as a look of fear covered her face. Your son. Pausing as he scratched the side of his head, just fainted at the middle school. Fainted? She repeated as she froze in one spot staring back at her father-in-law. Yep. The ambulance is taking him to the hospital right now. Let's go. The older man said as he then put on his coat and then followed Belinda into her office. Hey Macaulay. A voice rang out shortly after he had been carried out of the rear of the ambulance. The male's voice was firm yet loud enough to cause Macaulay to open his eyes and look off into the direction that it had come from. My name is Dr. Kennedy and I'm here to help you. Just seconds later he saw electronic doors open as he was then carried into the hospital. Then, as he saw many lights, attached to the ceiling, go over him as they made their way into the emergency room, he finally saw the face of the man that had spoken to him. He wasn't wearing blue scrubs like they do in the movies, but rather plain clothes with a name tag that said Scott Kennedy. MD, are you able to hear us, Macaulay? The medic asked. Yeah. Macaulay answered quietly, barely audible, but I'm scared. Hey Macaulay. The doctor said as he now stood by his side, you don't need to be scared. You're gonna be just fine. We just need to do some tests to make sure that nothing's wrong inside of you. Your parents are on their way here right now. As the doctor continued to talk, he held his hand on Macaulay's chest. With this he also kept eye contact with Macaulay as well. Right now, Macaulay, I need you to hold still and relax. We're gonna lift you onto the emergency room gurney. Okay? Alright. Macaulay responded. Even though the doctor's words were relieving, a couple tears still found their way down the side of Macaulay's face. Where is my sister? Oh Macaulay. A different woman's voice said suddenly, Dawn D is out in the waiting room waiting on your parents. Okay. Thank you, he said, still quietly, and then closed his eyes again to block out the bright light. From the time that he had opened his eyes, at the school, he had noticed that his head was strapped in a way, to the gurney, that prevented him from moving his head. When his eyes were open he only saw the doctor's face and then the bright lights. Well, you're polite. The doctor said, causing Macaulay, once again, to open his eyes. How would you like me to turn these lights off? Yes please. With his response the doctor directed a female nurse to turn off the lights and then to go get his medical file. Then, just moments later, Macaulay heard his father's voice. Daddy. I'm here buddy, Ron said as he stood on the opposite side from him as Dr. Kennedy. Is he gonna be alright, doctor? Well. The doctor responded as they both began to talk over Macaulay. I'm sure that your son is gonna be quite alright. Since we don't know exactly what had caused him to faint, however, I think that it would be a good idea to give him a CAT scan, do some blood work, and then possibly run him a little saline solution through and tell me Mr. Declue. Has your son been sick recently? Ah. No. He hasn't been sick, Ron said as he too rested his hands lightly on Macaulay's chest. Why? The reason that I ask. As the doctor immediately began to answer Macaulay's father, he simultaneously pulled up Macaulay's t-shirt exposing his bare belly, is because your son's body temperature is extremely low. As Dr. Kennedy continued, he also pulled Macaulay's t-shirt up far enough to reach the top of his sternum with his warm hands. Oh. I'm sorry Dr. Kennedy. That is normal with our family. You see, Dr. Redding was our doctor up until he passed away. He's the only doctor that our family has had. Until now. As Ron finished speaking he looked his son in the face. I love you Macaulay. I love you too Dad. The 12-year-old said with a slight smile. Then looked away from his father as the doctor unbuttoned the top couple buttons of his jeans. Hey Macaulay. When I press on your belly, let me know if it hurts at all. Alright? The doctor asked. Okay. Then, somewhere nearby, heard his mom's voice and his grandpa David's voice. Daddy. Mom and Grandpa are here. With their voices he then heard Dawn D's voice too. Just wait here son. I'll be right back, Ron said, and then quickly took off into the direction that his mom's voice had come from. Now, knowing that both of his parents were there, Macaulay suddenly felt safe and then just as eager to find out the cause of the fainting spell that created the hectic day. "Well, Macaulay," Dr. Kennedy spoke as his father left the room, "we'll find out, hopefully very soon, what happened to you. First though, we're gonna wheel you down to radiology and get some x-rays done. After that, hopefully, we'll be able to let you get up. Sound like a plan?" "Yes, sir," Macaulay said with a slight smile now on his face. "I think that my bladder is gonna explode if it takes much longer." Though he was intentionally attempting to be humorous as he, once again, found the lights, on the ceiling, moving rapidly over him again, he actually was serious about the need to urinate. Just as soon as the words left his mouth, he instantly felt the gurney come to a stop as the doctor, once again, came into view. "Macaulay. LT's gonna take at least 20 minutes before we're done with the x-rays. If you really have to go, I'm gonna have to help you, while you're still laying down. Are you gonna be able to wait?" Macaulay's thought process seemed to suddenly freeze as he attempted to evaluate the intense pressure that was quickly turning to pain. "Help me?" Macaulay was instantly shocked as he thought about his most private moments being infringed upon. Then, as he decided that he couldn't really wait, he quickly looked around himself to see what witnesses that there would be to his extremely modest moment. "I can't." "Don't worry, Macaulay. Nobody will see," the doctor ensured. "All right. I've gotta go real bad." The weight that he had previously felt, lifted by his parents arriving at the hospital, had now suddenly returned and now much heavier as the doctor pulled out a little red banana-shaped container. Much to his own delight, however, the doctor quickly pulled the gurney into radiology and securely closed the door behind him. Moments later, the doctor explained what was needed to be done to relieve his bladder. Without much choice to the matter, all that Macaulay could do was close his eyes tightly as he felt the doctor manipulate his body. Then, moments later on the doctor's command, felt relief come over him through the large level of embarrassment. It wasn't until about 1 o'clock that afternoon that Ronnie, Belinda, Macaulay, and Don D, in 2 individual Hummers, had reached the top of Finley Lane. Worn out, from the eventful day at the hospital, everyone was surprised to find a little blue car sitting in the driveway. Then, as Ron was forced to park Malachi's and Nicole's Hummer in the yard, he climbed out and then stared at his wife as she got out of their Hummer. "Well," Belinda said as they reached the front door of the house, "it's a good thing that the sun isn't shining today. Otherwise you would be stuck in the car, honey." They were surprised to find, the moment that they opened the door, that everyone was still awake as both Tom and Lucifer quickly found their way to the top of the stairs. Bare-chested, only wearing jeans, both Tommy and Lucifer announced that someone was there from the school. Immediately, with curiosity peeked out, Macaulay pushed between his parents and into the kitchen to find Lovisa? "Lovisa?" Ronnie repeated his son just as he walked into the kitchen. "Who is Lovisa?" As he looked towards a young girl, about his son's age, he saw her face full of joy as her eyes set themselves on Macaulay. "Oh good," Lovisa cried out as she jumped to her feet, then quickly wrapped her arms around him. "You're okay?" Beside the chair that Lovisa was sitting on, an older man stood and raised his hand to shake Ron's. "Sir. My name is Reggie Jewell. I'm Lovisa's father. My daughter was terribly upset today when your son collapsed at school. We're glad to see that he's okay." "Well. Thank you, Mr. Jewell," Ron responded as he firmly shook the man's hand. "My wife and I were startled very badly also. Would you like some coffee?" "Sure. I could handle a cup right about now," the man responded and then sat down as he watched his daughter take off down the hall with Macaulay. Moments before, both Tom and Lucifer had raced off down the hall and hadn't returned after Malachi asked them to put their shirts on. Angel was standing in the corner, within the counters, fully dressed in black clothes, and was just as surprised to hear about the events surrounding Macaulay as everyone else was. It was all caused by a sudden change in blood pressure, Belinda explained as she too sat down with a cup of coffee. "Blood pressure," Tommy repeated after Macaulay had explained to them what Dr. Kennedy had said. "Sounds more like flitter-padded to me." "Flitter-padded? What are you talking about, Tommy?" Macaulay asked as he sounded concerned about how his roommate spoke in front of Lovisa. Both Tom and Lucifer sat on the edge of their bed as Dondi played with a Power Rangers figure that stood beside the boy's computer. Lovisa stood beside Macaulay as he leaned against the bunk's ladder talking to Lucifer and Tom. "Haven't you ever seen Bambi?" The two deer were flirting with one another. "Just like you and Lovisa were. Right?" Lucifer responded for Tom. As Lucifer and Tom both silently waited for an answer, as they stared back to Macaulay and Lovisa, they could see both of the 12-year-olds blushing in response to the insinuation. "Well," Lovisa interrupted, "Macaulay, I asked you a question before you fainted at the school. Would you please go out with me?" With the question, Lovisa noticed Lucifer and Tom look at each other with a smirk on their faces. Seconds later they both looked back to Macaulay, as was Lovisa, as they waited for the answer. Then, in a very soft and quiet tone, barely audible, Macaulay looked directly back at her and whispered, "Yes. I've had a crush on you for a long time. I'd love to be in a relationship with you, Lovisa." Then, as they hugged each other, with Lovisa's back towards Lucifer and Tom, Macaulay looked, over her shoulder, towards his cousin and Tom and saw them smiling back. Moments later Tom gave Macaulay a thumbs up. As Tom continued to watch Macaulay and Lovisa, Lucifer then stared at the side of Tommy's head as he also reached out towards his hand. "I love you, Tommy," Lucifer whispered quietly enough that only Tom heard. "Would you go out with me?" Turning back to face Lucifer, with his smile still stretched ear to ear, he gently leaned forward, puckered up his lips, and then kissed Lucifer square on his lips. "For the rest of my life, Lucifer. I love you more than life itself." Now, hand in hand, they both looked back towards Macaulay and Lovisa. Macaulay was still watching them as Lovisa's back was still towards them. Macaulay gave both Lucifer and Tommy a thumbs up as he also winked at them. After about 10 minutes or so, Dondi had retreated to her bedroom as Macaulay and Lovisa both headed out the kitchen's glass door. As to this point Ronnie, Belinda, Malachi, Nicole, and Mr. Jewel were still deep in conversation as the kids and then Angel slipped out the door. "What are you guys up to?" Angel asked as they neared the back door to the garage. As he asked his question, he had also peered high into the sky to make sure that he was under the safety of an overcast. He was. "Ah. Just talking," Macaulay said as he looked back to his cousin. "Would you like to hang out with us, Angel?" "Sure. What do you have planned?" Angel asked as he then followed Louisa and Macaulay into the garage. "You know that we have plenty of time for about anything today considering that your health stirred all of us up early today." "Not intentionally," Macaulay said as he opened the garage door and then held it as Lovisa and Angel both walked in. "Lovisa and I were just..." "Ouch!" Lovisa suddenly shouted. "Hold on a second, Lovisa," Macaulay said, "I'll turn on the light." Then, just seconds afterwards, the fluorescent lights flickered on as Angel quickly hit the switch. "Look at that," Angel said as he immediately looked at a run of blood coming off of Lovisa's arm. "What did you cut yourself on?" Then, just as soon as the question left his mouth, Angel saw the sharp piece of wood protruding from a fire log within the stack of freshly cut pine. "There it is," Angel said as he pointed. "There's even some blood on it still." Reaching for Lovisa's hand, Macaulay gently grasped it and then brought her arm close to his face. Looking at it carefully, he noticed how a small portion of skin was peeled back, far enough that the tissues deep in her arm were dark red, as the blood quickly filled in the open gap. With the red substance close to his nose, a deep hunger began to grow quickly, contributing to the idea of taking a deep sniff of the fresh blood. With this, hunger also set in as the scent nearly caused Macaulay to drool. "Macaulay. What are you doing, honey?" "Honey?" Angel instantly thought to himself. "Well, Macaulay, you might as well taste it." "Do what?" Lovisa gasped. "Taste it," Macaulay answered for Angel. "I mean, if it's all right with you. Can I taste your blood?" "Macaulay. You're freaking me out. But yes, you can taste it, if you'd like to." Then, as she pulled her own face away from the cut, she watched intensely as Macaulay had first licked a run of blood that was about to drip onto the floor. Then, as he used his tongue to follow the run up towards the actual cut, he then bore his tongue into the soft tissues. With this he then sealed his lips around the wound. This experience was extremely odd to Lovisa, yet it had also felt good to her as well. As Angel had also watched, he too had began to feel the hunger as he watched the harvest. With this sense of hunger he drew himself closer to Lovisa's arm also. Then, as he carefully put one arm over Macaulay's back, he leaned forward and put his own face close to Macaulay's. Without any reaction from Macaulay, or any sign of rejection from Lovisa, he gently put his nose to her arm close to Macaulay's mouth. Breathing in the warmth of her skin, and the odor of fresh blood from his cousin's mouth, Angel slowly stuck out his tongue and began to lick the skin of Lovisa's arm beside Macaulay's mouth. He had tasted some of the blood, however, not quite like what he had tasted when he gently licked the edge of Macaulay's bottom lip. Holding on to Macaulay just a little tighter, with his arm, he carefully pried his tongue between Macaulay's bottom lip and Lovisa's skin. Inching his way further into the actual cut, Angel quickly found himself sharing the same space with Macaulay's tongue. Like this, both Macaulay and Angel nursed off of the same laceration as Lovisa just watched in shock. "Hey guys." Lovisa spoke up after about 5 minutes, "I'm starting to feel a little dizzy. I think that I need to sit down." Instantly, as the words came out of Lovisa's mouth, Angel pulled himself away. "Hey Macaulay. We better stop, buddy. We've taken too much blood." Without a verbal response, Macaulay did stop and then stood back from Lovisa. Where his mouth was now just a large bruise. A dark one that Lovisa immediately hid within her shirt. As Lovisa took her attention off of her arm, she looked up into Macaulay's face as she saw blood along the sides of his mouth and off of both canines. He almost seemed to be out of breath as his breathing sounds labored with each breath. His eyes were still fixed on her arm with a look, in his face, of that of a dog fixated on a raw piece of meat. His eye reflected the garage's fluorescent light, causing them to appear just as red as the blood that had just become a meal. Wiping the side of his mouth with his left hand, Macaulay then reached out with his right hand towards Lovisa. Just before Macaulay had reached her shoulder, Lovisa stepped forward and took a hold onto his arm. "Angel. What's wrong with him?" "He's alright, Lovisa." Angel answered as he too stepped towards his cousin. "What him and I had just done, when we were drinking your blood, is called harvesting." Looking into Lovisa's face, as he put one arm around Macaulay's waist, he continued. "I know that you love Macaulay. And I know you two intend to be together. And it's because of this, Lovisa, that I think that you should know that Macaulay is gonna need to harvest on a regular basis. And, when we do harvest, it takes an extremely large amount of energy wearing us out." "Why do you guys harvest, Angel?" Lovisa asked as she continued to stare at Macaulay. Still to this point, Macaulay seemed to be tensed as blood still remained on his teeth. "There are a lot of things that you're gonna learn about Macaulay and the rest of our family, Lovisa. A lot of things that will be hard for you to understand, and a lot of things that will be hard, for Macaulay alone, to explain to you. In good timing, Lovisa, you will know everything. I promise this to you. For right now, though, stay close to him and never stop loving him." "Oh. Don't worry about that, Angel." Lovisa responded, "If I had it my way, I'd live the rest of my life by his side." At about this time Macaulay had began to relax as his knees nearly began to give out from under his own weight. "I love you, Lovisa." "Thank you," Macaulay said in a volume just barely over that of a whisper. "And, I too promise that soon you'll know exactly what Angel is talking about. But please, keep all of this between us. We're supposed to keep a lid on it." As moments went by through conversation, Macaulay had soon felt completely regenerated and then soon, stronger than before harvesting off of Lovisa. As the end of March rolled around that year, it was somewhat pre-planned exactly what would take place for celebrating both Macaulay's and Dondi's birthday. For the most part the women would handle Dondi's celebration as the guys would go out over the town with Macaulay. These pre-planned events had pretty much everyone excited as they awoke in the late evening of March 28th. It was also pre-planned, that once the first adult had awoken, that they were to call over to both Lovisa Jewel's home and Bobby John's southern home and invite them to spend the weekend over at the Decluse residence. Macaulay, Lucifer, and Tommy had all woke up at about the same time as the smell of French toast cooking in the kitchen hit the room. At first Lucifer and Tommy just cuddled together and stared at one another without paying much mind to the fact that Macaulay had taken it upon himself to become their personal audience. Then, as Lucifer had noticed, out of the corner of his eye, that Macaulay's head was hanging down off of the upper bunk, "Hey Macaulay. How about you come down here and join us? All we're doing is laying down. It's not exactly warm enough, in here, to be uncovered. Come on down and lay down with us. In a little bit we'll go eat breakfast," Lucifer offered. "Okay," the soon-to-be 13-year-old said. Then quickly dashed down the ladder and into the bed beside Tommy. "Thank you guys." As Tom scooted himself over closer to the center of the mattress, he also turned over onto his back to where he could see Macaulay and yet still have his physical contact with Lucifer. "So," Tommy spoke up, "how does it feel to be almost 13 years old now, Macaulay?" Tommy asked as he set a hand on Macaulay's belly. "I don't know." Macaulay responded with a slight giggle. "How does it feel to be 16? Damn. You guys are about to get your driver's licenses." "I know," Lucifer said. "I can't wait. I want Dad to take us out in the Hummer and let us drive it around." "Why drive though?" Macaulay asked. "Soon we will all be able to fly and then we can go anywhere that we want. And, much faster than any car or airplane." As he finished speaking he turned over, onto his side, and leaned his chest against Tommy's chest and then set his right hand on top of Lucifer's hand that was rested on Tom's sternum. "Well, in a car we won't have to worry about daylight, so long as we have a covered place that we can get out in," Lucifer answered. "Also, that helps us vampires to blend in with the rest of the world." As Lucifer stopped talking, as he too laid on his side, he momentarily tilted his head enough to see Tommy's face and then lightly kissed him on the side of the jaw. In response Tommy wrapped his left arm around Lucifer's waist and lightly hugged him, pulling him closer to his own body. "I love you, Lucifer," Tommy said and then wrapped his right arm around Macaulay's waist as he lightly tugged on him too. Now, as all three of them were snuggled tightly together, they just listened to the noises from the kitchen, as breakfast was being prepared, listened to the slight traffic, outside, as headlights flashed through the window, and then listened to the sounds of each other breathing. With exhaled breaths, small puffs of steam billowed into the air just noticeable by the nearby street lights. It was only about another half hour that the boys had finally heard footsteps headed towards their room. Before the door opened, however, all three of them were up, standing in the middle of the room with their jeans in hand, and all standing on one foot as they struggled to put the jeans on. "Hey guys," Ronnie announced as he opened the door and flicked on the fluorescent light. "Ah. What's going on, you clowns?" LTS much easier with the light on. What he saw was three teens, only wearing boxers, and playing a balancing act with their clothes. "Hey Dad." Macaulay started as he followed Ron down the hallway from the bedroom. "Have you guys called Lovisa?" His father interrupted. "Yes. Lovisa and Bobby John are on their way over here right now." Just as they walked into the kitchen, Ron pulled a chair out from the table, for his birthday boy, as both Lucifer and Tommy struggled to pull out their own chairs and to put on their shirts at the same time. Moments later both Belinda and Dondi walked into the kitchen as well. "Good morning Uncle Malachi," Macaulay said as he looked over to his uncle. Malachi had been reading a newspaper and sipping on a cup of coffee. "Where is Uncle Eddie?" "Your Uncle Eddie is waking up Angel," Macaulay's mom answered. "They should be up here soon." Just as Belinda finished speaking out of mere coincidence, Eddie had then walked into the kitchen with Angel riding on his back. "Has the party started yet?" Eddie joked as he pulled a chair out for Angel, whom had fallen back to sleep, as he still hung on tightly to his back. This was one of the few moments that the household would see Angel barely dressed. Only wearing a pair of shorts, his arms and legs seemed to work together in supporting his 95-pound body frame. Yet, at the same time, working against Eddie's efforts in setting Angel down into a chair. "You'll never guess that he was 27 years old. Would ya?" Malachi said as he folded up the newspaper and set it aside. "Believe me," Eddie responded. "We still share the same bed and it's easy to forget that he's there." It was often intentionally made not known that Angel was 27 years of age, due to the fact that others might view him as being retarded or not right. If people were just left to assume that he was very young, they would look at his maturity as being an extremely intelligent child. In every way, from his small stature, cute kid appearance, no body hair of any kind, and well-groomed hair, any normal person would mistake him for not being any more than 10 years old. As Ron was still standing, he walked up, behind Eddie, and pried Angel's bare body off of his back. Immediately Angel's arms and legs moved to cling onto Ronnie just the same as they had to Eddie. It was just after everyone had eaten breakfast that both Bobby John and Lovisa had arrived. With their arrival everyone, within the Decluse family, anyhow, basically knew, in advance, what all was planned for that night. Bobby John and Lovisa were soon to be on that same page. Well guys. Ronnie interrupted a moment of excitement after their two visitors arrived. Grandma Karina and Grandma Sanchez are gonna be here soon too. There's some things that they are gonna teach your kids tonight. Teach us? Lovisa responded, I thought that this was only Macaulay's and Dondi's birthdays. As far as both Bobby John and Lovisa knew, this was gonna be just an ordinary birthday sleepover. Well, Ron answered. As my dad would say, that's what you get for thinking. Now guys listen, Ron continued as everyone gathered into the kitchen. When my mom and grandmother arrive we are all gonna gather into two groups. Dondi's birthday celebration, of which will take place here, in the house. And then Macaulay's birthday celebration, that will take place away from the house. Now, all the guys, except for Bobby John will go out for Macaulay's while all of the girls, except for Lovisa and my grandmother, will stay here for Dondi's. Standing beside Angel, Lovisa looked at him and quietly whispered, as to avoid disrupting Macaulay's father, what's going on Angel? You remember a couple of months ago, when I told you that there was a lot of stuff that we had to tell you about our family and Macaulay? Angel whispered back into his cupped hand close to her ear. Yeah. I remember. You told me in the garage after Macaulay and you harvested off of me. Well. Tonight's the night Lovisa. Angel answered with as much of a serious tone in his voice that he could possibly muster, you're gonna know our family secrets tonight. Just after Angel explained himself to Lovisa, everyone's attention was turned towards the hallway as Karina and Marie walked into the kitchen. Well guys. Marie said not more than perhaps a minute after arriving. Are we all ready to get started? We have a very long night ahead of us. With this said, by the elderly women, Lovisa then looked back towards Angel again. And then reached out, towards Macaulay, and took his hand up into her own. I think we are Grandma. Malachi spoke up as he put on a coat, we've just gotta make sure that everyone is dressed warm. Well then. Malachi, how about you lead the way to the backyard, I want you to carry me. Then, as Malachi walked out the sliding glass door, Mrs. Sanchez followed him. Moments later, within an area that Malachi, Ronnie, and Eddie had previously shoveled, Ronnie, Eddie, Angel, Tommy, Lucifer, Lovisa, Macaulay, Malachi, and Marie all stood within a circle. Okay Lovisa, listen up honey, Marie said as she cleared her throat, and just so that you know Lovisa, I'm Macaulay's great-grandmother, Marie Sanchez, she continued as she stood right beside the 12-year-old. As you can obviously see Lovisa, all the males in our family have long canine teeth. And the reason for this, Lovisa, is because we are all vampires. As Marie said this she instantly saw a look cross the child's face like as if she was immediately lost for words, just hang in there for me Lovisa. I'll continue to explain so that you'll completely understand me. Now, after we are done for the night, and ready to go back into the warm house, you should fully understand. Alright honey? Okay, Lovisa said as she still had an odd look on her face, I'm listening. Alright Lovisa, Marie continued. For right now I need Angel to carry you on his back, Macaulay, you ride on your father's back, and I'll ride on Malachi's. As she said this, she watched Lovisa wrap her arms around Angel, of whom was smaller than herself, and so it looked odd from the point of view of the others. Immediately Angel had to rearrange himself to where Lovisa was behind him, slightly bent over him, with her arms over his shoulder and around his neck. Macaulay had, as usual, attempted to be lifted, by his father, in the front. Correcting him, for preparation of his first experience of flight, Ron knelt down, to one knee, allowing his son to climb up onto his back, with his arm securely around his neck. "Now Malachi," Marie continued as she walked up behind him, "remember that I am your grandmother, and that I don't know exactly how much my old heart will take. Take it easy with me please." "I will, Grandma," Malachi answered as he then lowered himself a little so that she could wrap her arms around his neck. "Trust me." "Okay guys, let's go," the older women announced, and then instantly Lovisa found herself being lifted high into the air, causing her to have to hold on tightly to Angel. "Oh my God," Lovisa gasped. "What are we doing?" "Just relax," Ron said as he floated close to Angel's and Lovisa's side. "Tonight is Macaulay's 13th birthday. And on his 13th birthday, of which is exactly at 1:22 in the morning, Macaulay too will be able to fly just the same as the rest of us guys." "You will?" Lovisa asked as she stared at Macaulay as he laid on his father's back. "I'm." "Yep. And you're gonna be one of the first people to see me fly. Isn't that cool?" Macaulay asked as he carefully reached out towards her with one hand. As to this point, Lovisa hadn't really taken notice to how far off of the ground that they were. Suddenly, anything having to do with vampires, flying, or the harvesting, a few months prior, didn't matter. All that really mattered was her love towards Macaulay and that they were together. "Yeah. That is cool, Macaulay." With her response, Lovisa also reached out and then held on to his hand. Watching them, as he smiled at the situation, Angel carefully moved himself closer to Ron and Macaulay. "Okay, you love birds." Marie spoke up again. "Malachi, let's head over to the top of the sand rocks. By Witch's Crack." As these words came out of Marie's mouth, Lovisa suddenly realized that they were about 50 feet off of the ground. With this discovery, she instantly tightened her grip onto Angel's neck, almost cutting off his air supply. "Love." "Lovisa," Angel gasped as he grabbed a hold of her arms, "don't strangle me." Immediately Lovisa loosened her arms from his neck and then held on tighter to his shoulders instead. "I'm sorry, Angel," Lovisa said as she quickly buried her face into his back, between his shoulders blades. "I didn't mean to choke you." "I know you didn't," Angel whispered back over his own shoulder, "just relax." Seconds later, everyone was over the ledge of the steep drop-off, of the sand rocks, and about to land on the snow-covered rocky surface. "Well," Marie said just as Malachi sat down on the ground. "I've forgotten what it looked like from way up here." As they all now stood on the ground, Lovisa refusing to let go of Angel, they all looked at the nighttime sky that laid over Craig, Colorado. The March 29th air was a little warmer than usual for that particular time of year. However, it was also just chilly enough that it wasn't comfortable enough to stand around in the cool air. Especially on top of the one object that would normally protect Craig from the Arctic winds out of the north. "What time is it, Malachi?" Marie asked quietly. "It's only 10 o'clock, Grandma. We still have 3.5 hours left till Macaulay's birthday," Malachi spoke quietly as he looked towards his grandma as she stood just to his left. Macaulay and Lovisa were preoccupied with one another about 20 feet away and hadn't heard what was being said. "Well, Malachi, maybe it's time for you to show us just how fast you can fly. The only example that you've shown me was at the time of your wedding, when you carried your mother into the front door of the house." "Yeah. I remember that," Malachi said as a slight grin grew across his face. "I also remember how shocked that you and Mom both were." "Seems like just yesterday, Malachi." The older women continued. "Now you're a father to a teenager. Your baby brother is the father to a teen. Life goes on too quick sometimes. Just never forget who you are, Malachi." "What do you mean, Grandma?" Malachi asked as he still wore his smile ear to ear. "What I mean, Malachi, is, let's see, how do I put it? I don't want you to ever forget." Reaching out towards him, as she placed her hand on his chest, she went on, "that you are Malachi DeClue. A loving person, who loves his baby brother, whom used to help change his baby brother's diapers, who loves his parents more than life itself, loves his community and the people within the community, has a general love for all people. Honey, I could go on and on. But these are some of the many things that make you, you. And most importantly, to me anyway, is that you're one of my grandchildren." "I love you, Grandma," Malachi said as he turned to face her, and then lightly wrapped his arms around her. "I love you so much." With the quiet conversation between them, and then the sudden hug, everyone's attention was soon on the two, as Marie found out, when she looked over her grandson's shoulder. "I love you too, honey. Now, how about an example of your top speed, Malachi?" Looking towards her great-grandchildren, whom were all at play to keep warm, she cupped her hands together. "Okay guys. Macaulay and Lovisa. Let's get back to flying. You guys all need to follow Malachi and I." "Alright." "Where to, Grandma?" Malachi asked before lifting off. "Somewhere that is much warmer than this." "Okay." Malachi responded. "How about Galveston, Texas?" "Let's go." "You know it better than I do," Marie said, and then held on as Malachi softly lifted off of the rocky surface. Without another word, Malachi, Marie, Angel, Lovisa, Ronnie, Macaulay, Lucifer, Tommy, and Eddie were heading towards the clouds, soon rising above them, and then heading southeast. With Malachi leading the way, clouds beneath them were turning into just one big blur as they moved faster and faster. Soon, approximately 5 minutes after leaving the sand rocks, they found themselves flying over the Gulf of Mexico as Malachi simultaneously steered their direction into a large left-hand turn as they also descended to just over the height of the waves. With everyone side by side of one another now, rather than just Malachi leading the way, they slowed down as they approached two separate clusters of light. The larger one of the two clusters, off to their right, was Houston, as the smaller of the two, towards their left, was Galveston. Slowing down, as they approached the sandy beach, they had rotated their bodies to where they were in a standing position rather than laying on her belly. Then, with the sand just beneath their feet, they softly set down. The air temperature, compared to that in Colorado, had to have been at least a 50 to 70 degree difference. The wind coming off of the Gulf of Mexico was warm, even daring Angel to remove his heavy black leather coat. "Now. That's more like it," Marie said as she let go of Malachi. "Yeah," Angel agreed, "we're gonna have to travel here more often." As Lovisa let go of Angel, Angel then unzipped his coat, allowing the warm air to flow through the material and warm his chilled body. "Well guys," Marie said as everyone stood together in one circle, "this is where we're gonna do this." Pausing as she removed her coat, she then carefully tossed it over her shoulder. "Macaulay. Come here, honey." Seconds later, as Macaulay stood by her side, she looked her great-grandson in the eyes and then spoke quietly. "Macaulay. Between you and your sister, this is the first time, in the history of vampires, that we've had twins. And, it's because of this, that I'm sorta celebrating to myself, your birthday. It's been a while since I've participated in one of my grandchildren's birthdays. And it's this one, your 13th birthday, Macaulay, that I think will be some of the most fruitful memories for me." Pausing, as she embraced her grandson, she held on to him as she continued. She had also noticed, as she spoke to Macaulay, that the other kids, except for Lovisa, who was also paying attention to Marie, were now playing within the warm sand after removing their coats, shoes, and socks. Knowing that everyone was happy, as they played together, made this moment that much more memorable to her. "Now Macaulay. Tonight you're gonna learn how to fly. And while you're learning this, it is important that you always use extreme caution when doing anything that only us vampires are able to do, in front of others. As you should know very well, Macaulay, the belief of vampires is only within myth. It's important that people continue to believe that vampires are only myth. It's this myth that protects us, honey. And if we're exposed, we could be destroyed. My point here, my grandson, is that whatever it is that you choose to do within flight, harvesting, or anything else, that only we do, you must not allow anyone else to see it or hear of it." Pausing, as Marie waved for Lovisa to come closer, she then continued. "Sweetie, I realize that there may be too much going on for you at one time tonight. This relationship, with my great-grandson, all in one night, has turned itself into something that would be hard, if not impossible, to fully comprehend. But I want you to know something. As if tonight, after Macaulay's actual birthday, at 1:22, Macaulay will have the option, if you would like, to turn you into one of us." As Marie said this, she saw Lovisa's eyes widen up. "Before you say anything, please allow me to finish. If you two decide to do this, Lovisa, to become one of us, you will live a life way beyond the life of anyone else. Your children, years down the road from now, will be born predestined to protect you and everything that you love. Nothing in this world will be able to hurt or kill you unless it penetrates your heart or involves physical contact with holy water. With Macaulay's birthday, tonight, he will no longer be able to participate in public schooling. But why? Lovisa suddenly gasped. Because, with male vampires, over the age of 13, he won't be able to be out in daylight any longer. He will no longer be able to harvest, which is something that his existence requires, without either killing the donor or turning them into one of us as well. This means that he'll have to resort to livestock. Can't he just harvest off of me? Lovisa interrupted. Not after he has turned you into one of us. Honey. Vampires can't feed off of each other. Things are gonna be different after tonight, guys. But, just as our family has dealt with it, our family will continue to deal with it for years to come. As long as our existence remains hidden. Pausing again, as she now looked for Malachi, she found him playing with Lucifer and Tommy, as they seemed to be playing tag. Malachi. Marie hollered loudly. What time is it, honey? It's 1:10, Grandma. Malachi hollered back loud enough to be heard. With Malachi's response, Ronnie now walked over to his son and picked him up off of the ground. Is my boy ready to fly? Ron teased as he tickled his son. Yeah. Macaulay managed between giggles, I'm ready, Dad. Well. Here's what we're gonna do then. In a couple minutes. At 1:20. I'm gonna float up just a little off of the sand. Then, while I'm just a little ways over your head, I want you to keep trying to reach me. All that you've gotta do is want, with your mind, to move closer to me. With this, you should automatically levitate towards me. Afterwards, Ron continued, we'll play around here, at the beach, a while longer, and then we'll head home. But I wanna make sure, while we're here at the beach, that you've mastered flying. Alright, buddy? Okay, Dad. I'm ready, Macaulay said and then gave his father an unexpected hug. Thank you, Dad. I love you. I love you too, Macaulay, Ron said as he then also kissed his son on the forehead, and, happy birthday. Then, letting go of his son, he quickly looked at his watch and then began to levitate, while in a standing position, and then held out his arms, straight out to his sides, as he slowly rotated to a complete stop, looking down at Macaulay. Then, as he stared at his son, he lowered one arm towards Macaulay's direction as he also opened his hand, like as if to shake the teen's hand. In response, as Macaulay stared back to his father, he too held out a hand, towards his dad. Okay, Macaulay, come to me, buddy. You can do it. Then, moments later, as he continued to watch his son, Macaulay then began to float into the air. Then, like a rehearsed skit, Macaulay firmly held onto his dad's open hand. Simultaneously, just as their hands touched one another, everyone else began to clap, whistle, and cheer. Raising her hands to her face, Lovisa was nearly in tears, as the person that she loved the most had reached an important mile marker in his life. Though her mind was still cluttered, from the confusion within what she had been raised to believe was a myth, she had also known that she was personally witnessing the highest level of love, between a father and son, that she had ever seen. I love you, Macaulay. Lovisa thought to herself. I love you too, Lovisa. Macaulay suddenly said, as he looked away from his father, and towards her. As he looked down towards her, he had seen a moment of shock go through her as he read her thoughts. Just as fast as that shock cleared, however, a smile quickly crossed her face. Then, as Macaulay looked back at his father, he continued to hold his hand as his uncle Malachi had then also levitated to their position. Without any exchange of words, Malachi took Macaulay's other hand as they all then changed positions to where it had appeared, that they were playing on a pillow of air on their bellies, just above the heads of everyone else, as they remained on the beach and watched in awe. Then, as Malachi and Ronnie then grasped hands, to where they looked like skydivers, they began to spin in a circle. Wow, Tommy whispered to himself, that's cool. As he then continued to watch the 3-0, Lucifer walked up behind Tommy and hugged him lightly from the back. In response, Tommy carefully pulled Lucifer, with his own arms, tighter to his back as he felt his breathing on the back of his own neck. I love you, Lucifer, Tom whispered again without taking his eyes off of Malachi, Ronnie, and Macaulay. I love you too, Tommy, Lucifer said as he tilted his head forward and kissed Tom on the side of the neck. Moments later, The two of them slowly levitated to only a couple of feet off of the ground as Lucifer lightly wrapped his arms around Tommy's waist. "And Bobby John," Karina said as she sat on the couch beside him, "keep in mind, that if you ever want, that you too can become one of us. Malachi, Ronnie, Lucifer, Tommy, Eddie, Angel, and Macaulay are all able to turn you into one of us at any time." While Karina continued to talk to Babylon, he kept looking down at the floor as his mind had now fully understood the long teeth from his long-time school peer. Bobby John had remembered back to a time, at the beginning of kindergarten, when Macaulay had harvested off of him. Ron had caught them and put a stop to it. "Then July 19th of next year, your 13th birthday, you'll be able to fly just the same as the other guys. Between now and then, however, you would grow canines, just the same as your children would be born vampires regardless if you become one or not. And those children will be born predestined to protect their mother and everything that she loves. Of which includes you. Once you're 13, you wouldn't be able to attend public schooling." As Karina said this, a grin suddenly appeared on his face as his eyes simultaneously opened wide. "And then you would live forever so long as you regularly harvest fresh blood. You would be part of a large family that loves and flourishes more than most other families. The purest of brotherhood. And the warmest of profitable eternal glow ever. You would be considered to be a creature of the night. A nocturnal being that lives to the beat of an entirely different source of life and love that makes you look forward to the several centuries of eternal life ahead of you." Carefully embracing Bobby John, with both arms, she pulled him close to herself as Don D held onto his hand. "This is our invitation to you, Bobby John. It's up to you what you decide to do with it. Whichever direction that you do choose, however, we will support your choice." "Mrs. DeClue," Bobby John finally said, "I love your granddaughter very much. And it's through this love, that most likely, I'll choose this eternal life over whatever it is that you would call the life that I've always known." "Mortal life," Nicole interrupted. "Mortal life," Bobby John then repeated and then looked back to Don D who still held his hand firmly. "Don D, if you would like me to make this change, just say the word and then I'll have whomever you choose, within your family, to infect me." Breaking loose from the circle that he formed with his father and Uncle Malachi, Macaulay then lowered himself to the ground, where Lovisa stood beside his Grandma Sanchez. Landing softly in the sand, he picked up her hand and encouraged her, without words, to go with him. Seconds later, as they stood face to face to one another, they were rising high into the sky as warm gusts of air blew Lovisa's hair all around. Being that it was dark, and both of them were unfamiliar with the area, they only floated above the rest of the family but only much higher. High enough that they were just out of sight and out of hearing range. "I don't care what you are, Macaulay," Lovisa said. "I do know, however, that I still love you and that I want to spend the rest of my life with you. How would you like to become one of us right now then?" Macaulay asked as he held Lovisa close. You mean right here and now?" Lovisa asked quietly. "Yeah. It would be the perfect way to end our adventure. Nobody at your home would know because female vampires are daywalkers. Meaning that the sun doesn't affect female vampires like us males, and also female vampires don't grow extended canines. Just don't go near holy water." "It will work perfectly, won't it?" Lovisa asked as she wrapped her arms tighter around him and then laid her head gently on his shoulder. "Yes. It will be perfect." "Well then." Lovisa now whispered into his ear, "Please do it now." As she stopped talking, she then immediately put her nose against his neck and began to breathe in the warmth of his skin. Then, just as she had dared herself to seal her lips onto his neck, for a hickey, she had suddenly felt something sharp bore itself into the side of her own neck, causing her to pause at first, as she hoped that it was the feel of his canines, and then quickly relaxed, the side of her face, back onto his shoulder, as sleep quickly overwhelmed her ability to stay conscious. As Angel, Lucifer, and Tommy all quickly replaced Macaulay's place within the circle that he had formed with his father and uncle, they then continued with their fun and enjoyment. Moments later, Eddie too joined in the circle, and then all of them took one another's hands as they all circled just above Marie's head. Though Marie was happy to see her family enjoying themselves above her, she also wondered what choices Macaulay and Lovisa were making as she attempted to peer beyond the human circle and deep into the darkness beyond them. "How about my father?" Dondi offered as she stared back up, beside her grandma Karina, into Bobby John's hazel eyes. Bobby John was about 120 pounds at the age of 12 with dark blonde, perhaps reddish, hair. Normally Bobby John wore jeans with a plaid button-up shirt and, usually, had some grease and oil under his fingernails as he often worked, even at his young age, on cars. Today, however, besides the fact that he did regularly shower, his nails were very clean and well-groomed. "I don't know when the last time was that my father harvested, but I'm sure that his time is soon coming." "Well now Dondi," Belinda spoke up, "remember that Bobby John needs to wait until you two are about to live with each other. I don't think that Bobby John is prepared to have to make excuses to his parents yet." "His mom," Dondi interrupted, "his mom isn't married." "Well either way. You do know what I'm saying Dondi. We will have to wait until a time of which he will be allowed to move into our home with you. Until then, however, you two can just carry on together as you normally would." "Well guys," Karina said as she let go of Bobby John and then stood up. Nicole, honey, would you please go out to my car, we bought cakes for both Macaulay and Dondi. And Belinda, dear, would you please go get a bucket of ice cream out of the garage?" "Yep." Both girls answered and then quickly disappeared out of the living room, leaving behind Karina, Bobby John, and Dondi. "How about we watch some DVDs until the guys get back," Bobby John said as he looked up to Karina. "That sounds like a good idea," Karina said, and then walked out into the kitchen. "You two just stay busy until they get back. Hopefully it won't take much longer." As Karina stopped talking, she looked at the clock on the microwave. It read 1:42. "This is cool," Angel said as he held his position within the circle. As he looked straight across from himself, he saw a smile on both Tommy's and Lucifer's faces. "I think that we should do this more often." "We just might," Eddie agreed as he held Angel's right hand with his left. "You know, now that we don't have any young children, or any that can't fly minus Dondi, we can go out more often and just enjoy ourselves." Periodically, and unintentionally, pretty much everyone, as they kept their place within the circle, kept peering deep into the night sky as they wondered if Macaulay and Lovisa were still nearby. Once in a while someone would be able to look down, and see that Marie was also looking up into the sky. "Let's spin faster," Ronnie yelled as he too looked straight across the human wheel. Seconds later, just on his command, the circle was spinning fast enough to cause a whirlwind, within the sand below them, to spin sand all over the place, causing Marie to have to cover her face. Just as they had realized the mess that they were creating, below, everyone suddenly slowed down as they saw something, from up above them, lower itself down into the center of their circle. "Macaulay," Malachi gasped. There was about a 20-foot diameter worth of space within their circle. Along with the darkness of the night, the lights of Galveston being blocked by the sand that remained in the air, and the circular movement that caused many items to blur. What has happened?" With his question, the rotation of the circle stopped, yet held together, as everyone watched Macaulay carry Lovisa's limp body to the beach below. Landing firmly in the sand, right in front of his great-grandmother, Macaulay knelt down to one knee and laid Lovisa's sleeping body onto the sand. From a witness point of view, it would appear that Macaulay was handing an offering to Marie as she too knelt down to her knees, on the opposite side from her great-grandson. "Well, it didn't take long for you to make that choice. Did it?" "Grandma. This is a choice that her and I both made together. And I believe that we have made the right choice," the 13-year-old said as he looked the elderly women in the eyes. Unknown to both Macaulay and Marie, the others, as they still held hands, and within their circle, landed in the sand around them as they watched and listened to the exchange of words. "Well, Macaulay," Marie spoke, "I believe that we have accomplished what we came here for. What do you say we go home?" Marie asked as she lightly covered Lovisa with her coat. "You go ahead and put her coat on and your own coat, and then pick her up to carry her home. All right?" "Okay, Grandma Marie. Let's go," Macaulay said and then looked up, while he still kneeled down to find his father standing right behind him. "I'm proud of you, Macaulay," Ron said as he put a hand on his son's shoulder. "This is one of your most important steps in this life. A step that will forever mark your place in this world and open the doors to your future offspring." "Thank you, Father," Macaulay said as he stood with Lovisa within his arms. "I believe that I've walked into a chapter of my life that no other person has ever read. A chapter that will open the door to many opportunities for Lovisa, myself, and then my children on down the road. And I would like to thank you, Dad, for writing this book." "Macaulay," Ron said as he lightly put his son's coat over his shoulder and then zipped up his own coat. "I didn't write this book." With this said, he watched his grandma Marie climb onto Malachi's back. "Let's go home, buddy." Karina had just gotten plates and bowls out of the cupboard when Nicole and Belinda had all returned with cake and ice cream in hand. In fact, Don D and Bobby John had enough time to get the DVD out of its case when Don D's grandma, Karina, had warned them, once again, that the guys should be home soon. "Well," Don D said, "when they get here we can pause it. Until then we, including my mom, and Nicole, and you, Grandma, can watch it," Don D said as if it was just a simple matter of fact. Then, not but only 20 seconds after the words left her mouth, the kitchen's sliding glass door opened as Malachi and Ronnie walked in together. Right behind them was Macaulay as he carried Lovisa in his arms. "What's going on?" Belinda asked as she approached her son. "She is one of us now," Macaulay announced before anyone else had a chance. "Oh my God," Nicole gasped. "Macaulay, go ahead and lay her on mine and Malachi's bed." "All right, honey." "Okay. Should I leave the light on?" Macaulay asked as he immediately headed down the hall. "Yes," Nicole responded. "In fact, I'll follow you in there." Just as they walked into the room, Nicole quickly pulled down a blanket, so that she could be covered from the cool room. Then, just as Macaulay pulled the heavy blanket up to Lovisa's chin, he then walked back out, with his aunt, to the kitchen, where they all shared together the evening's events. "You guys went all the way to Texas and back?" Bobby John asked in shock. "How do you guys fly that quick?" "All in good timing," Angel answered. "You will know everything that there is to know about being a vampire." With this said, everyone then sat down at the table for cake and ice cream. The birthday celebration lasted for about 3 hours. Then, at about 5 o'clock in the morning, Lovisa Hand finally found her way out of the room and walked into the kitchen. "Well, welcome to the party, Lovisa," Macaulay joked as he stood up and walked up to her. "I feel like that I got hit by a train. I didn't even know that we were back in Colorado, until I walked out of the bedroom where I recognized the hallway." As she spoke, her hair seemed to stick out into all directions. In fact, some of the hair had stuck to her face. Immediately, Macaulay used his hand to carefully push back her hair, exposing her smile. "Well, what do you think?" Macaulay asked. With his question, Macaulay had also held onto her arm and hand as he truly was concerned about her welfare. "Think about what?" Lovisa asked. Feeling very touched by his concern, she had also lightly held onto Macaulay as well. "About being a vampire. Like me and my family." Immediately, just as he explained himself to Lovisa, she used her free hand to swipe at her own lips. "Lovisa," Macaulay continued as he simultaneously reached out for her wandering arm, "female vampires don't grow extended teeth. So, is there anything to prove that I'm a vampire?" As Lovisa spoke, and not yet quite all the way awake yet, she had one eye open wider than the other as she countered Macaulay's question. "Well." Pausing, as Macaulay had been asked a very good question, he peered over towards Angel, whom was the only person in the kitchen with them. "Angel," Macaulay thought, "is there a way to prove that she's a vampire?" "Cutting her and watching her heal," Angel suggested as he stood up from the table. Then, as he walked over towards the coffee machine, he opened a drawer under the coffee machine and exposed the household cutting utensils. "Will it hurt her?" Macaulay continued with his ESB. Out of the corner of Macaulay's eye, he could see that Lovisa was waiting on an answer as she just watched the two boys make faces at one another. "No. It won't hurt her," However, it may scare her if you don't give her some sort of explanation beforehand. Angel said as he picked up a paring knife and then handed it to Macaulay. Now Lovisa's eyes were wide open as Macaulay turned to face her. She won't feel any pain though. Well Lovisa, Macaulay said, there is a way to prove it. And it won't hurt. I promise. My God, Angel. I hope that you're right about this. Trust me. I've never given you reason to not trust me. Angel thought as he headed back to his seat. Are you sure? Lovisa asked as her eyes stared at the sharp knife that reflected the kitchen's fluorescent light. Like. We don't really have to prove anything, Macaulay. We can just trust me, Lovisa. I would never do anything to hurt you. If you'd prefer, you can do it yourself. Pausing, as he handed the wooden handle to her, just a small cut. Like a paper cut, if you'd like. You won't feel any pain. You will see, however, your cut heal right before your eyes. Without further interrogation, or hesitation, Lovisa quickly, while still staring Macaulay in the eyes, swiped the knife across the palm of her hand. Then, just afterwards, both Macaulay and Lovisa looked down to her hand to see both ends of the incision folding in on itself as the blood seemed to be absorbed back into the body. Within 10 seconds there was no evidence of any injury and it didn't hurt.